Mayor Scott,
How are you?
I am doing great. Welcome to Vision Chats, where the only thing that matters is the future. And you're here with us today, Mayor Scott, after a press conference that I just watched. And so appreciate your comments. You and I don't know one another yet. Hopefully, we will more in the future. But I've been following your career and all of the work that you've been doing. Let me first start by just acknowledging what the press conference was about. This was about the arrest that was connected to the killing of Dante Barksdale, and you've shared a lot about that. I won't go into all of the things that you've talked about in the press conference, but if you feel comfortable, Mr. Mayor, maybe talk a little bit about Tater, about Dante himself, and what he meant to you, and the work that he's done for the city of Baltimore. And I have here on my screen his book, Growing Up Barksdale, that I encourage everybody to get, and we can take it from there. And first of all, how are you doing? This might be an emotional moment too for you because I
Yeah,
know you described him as a friend.
I am doing okay. It is a while it's bringing peace, not just to me, but more importantly to his family and his coworkers and to the city because of what Dante and what Tatum meant so much to all of us. But it is a situation where you get emotional because it's as Director Jackson put it in the press conference. It's like you have a scab and you pull it back off, and those emotions are raw again. But we know that Dante was a true son of Baltimore. He was a friend and a brother to me. Uh, uh, I spent so many times, nights walking around, talking with him, days talking with him in our communities about how we can be better. He prevented so many people from falling victim to violence in our city. And I think that today we have a sense of peace. And now we can go through the closure of a trial, which will be a tough thing for all of us. But we know that Dante is looking at us now and saying that we have to not only go through that trial, but we also have to forgive because he says forgiveness was the realest thing ever. Like that's the thing that we have to remember as we go through this process to heal our cities from this incident and work to prevent so many more from going through the same
Mm.
thing.
How does that? How does one do that? Forgive. That feels like it's a maybe easier said than done. I know it's something that I struggle with. How do you do it yourself, and then show up to work with that type of mindset every day?
Well, for me, I can talk about it in a personal sense. It's about personal growth. Uh, it took me a long time to get to a point where I was able to understand the power in forgiveness and the power of letting things go, the power of growing in an emotional way. Uh, Best example I can give you is that I was robbed at gunpoint in 2009 by two young men. And because of the way our system is, I never got to face them in court, never had any really closure reconciliation until in 2019. One of the young men's lawyers reached out to me and said that he wanted to meet me and talk to me and was really looking forward to changing his life once he returned home from prison. And it was the best thing I've ever done.
Mm.
We both were able to have that closure. We both were able to understand how each other felt. And to be quite honest, like I went to the conversation, it really became, it was essentially like it was two friends, long lost friends talking about an incident. And I actually then went to court a couple weeks after and testified for the young man to be released early and to work and help to see him get the support that he needed to do that. Because I was 25 years old, when 26 years old when it happened, right? Uh, uh, there is no way that I wasn't the same person at 35 that I was then, right? Uh, he was 16. He's not the same person at 26 that he was at 16. And we have to do that and understand that everything has to be let go at some point, and that you, because if you don't, it will hold you, it will eat you alive forever, it will make your life harder because you have to grow in that way. And when you think about our city, forgiveness is something, and reconciliation is something that we could use a lot of.
So I didn't plan to start our conversation today on gun violence, but obviously the press conference is leading into that. And what you just shared is just so beautiful. And you're right, that might be one of the things that might be holding the city back. How does the city, you've talked about gun violence in your campaign as mayor, you continue to talk about it. It's one of the many themes that you talk about. How does the city move to that place or uses the power of forgiveness to address this big issue of gun violence?
Well, I think it's a part of what has to be a complete strengthening and reimagining of public safety, right? I think that's what this is a part of. When you're attacking gun violence as a disease and trying to cure it, as Dante did each and every day, you're looking at it from its totality, right? You're not, you're not going to take medicine consistently after a disease has been taken from you or cured from your body. And that's when we get to the part of reconciliation and forgiveness. But now what we have to do is really dig in deep to that work. That means that we can no longer expect that building and creating public safety in our neighborhoods and for our residents is going to be solely in the backs of the police department. They can't accomplish it alone. For example, the women and men of BPD are brave, they're talented, they did the great work to bring the young man who murdered Dante into custody, but they're not trauma counselors, they're not mental health workers. That's why we announced a big 911 diversion program to start to get them out of that business, to get the professionals that we have here in Baltimore, that is the home to Johns Hopkins, that creates some of the best health and mental health minds that the world will ever see. We are a city that has that infrastructure. That means we have to further the work of Dante and our violence interrupters. That means we have to do what Director Jackson of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement is doing, is building a public safety model from the community up. All of that plays a part, but we also still have to focus on the day-to-day. That's why we're focusing on those who are trafficking guns into the city of Baltimore and making sure that those folks are being held accountable. That's why we're doing the work like these folks did with Dante and making sure we're holding people that harm people are accountable. But we also have to invest in the future. That's why the investments in education and rec and parks, all of the things are a part of carrying violence in Baltimore and allowing us to get to a point of reconciliation and forgiveness.
That's I think that's really beautiful. One of the things also that I've seen you talk a lot about is the tale of two Baltimores. And we started talking about one of those Baltimores, but as a transplant to the city, I have seen also the multiple facets of Baltimore's. Allow me to just show you a picture that I took of the city. And if they ever fire me from Johns Hopkins, hopefully I'll have a career in photography. But I'm really proud of just so much about the city. Let's talk about the economy of the city and what you see in the future for this beautiful metropolitan area with all of its opportunities. Where do you see it go in the next 5 and 10 years with all of its assets?
Yeah, I think that we know we have strong assets here in Baltimore. And as we come out of this pandemic, it's about how we not just bring things back, but bring them better, right? When you think about our port and what it does for the city of Baltimore, what it does for the state and really the country and the world, it's an asset that you cannot replace. It's irreplaceable. Making sure that they have the support that they need to continue to be the place where basically every car that goes through our port, we have to build that up. When you think about our tech industry, how tech startups that are coming from Hopkins and other places are a growing economy and growing sector here for us, we have to invest in that to make sure that they not only start here, but they stay here, that they hire here, that they grow here. That's what we have to do. When you look at our tourism, we have to modernize that. We have to modernize our inner harbor. We have to take it into the 21st century and make sure that that crown jewel can be lifted back up. We have to also do something that Baltimore has been afraid to do, and that's invest in the small and medium-sized businesses in order for them to create the environment that larger companies want to come to, instead of trying to just go after the big fish. That's what we're going to do, because we are a city that is placed where we are, that no one else can do. No one else is going to be this close to DC, but that much cheaper. No other city in the country has that. We have to utilize that. We have to build on our deep culture and history. We have to build on the infrastructure, the great things that we have here, to make our city the most vibrant city that it can be.
So what's in our way to get there? What's in your way as an ambitious mayor who wants to make all of this change happen? Boil it down to just what is the big challenge and how do we tackle it?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things there. One, for me on the inside, when you take over a city government in 2020 that's operating like it's 1994, you cannot produce 2021 results with an outdated government. That's why we're modernizing it. That's why we're doing the simple things of redoing our procurement system. That's why I brought on a professional city administrator and a dynamic team of deputy mayors to dig into those issues, so that we are creating a city government that is efficient, effective, using taxpayer dollars, but also based in the time that we're living in. We also know that right now, 1A and 1A, crime and COVID, that they both prevent us from reaching our highest potential. Violent crime, of course, for a longer period of time. And that's why we have to dig, as you and I were just talking about, into that issue. We also have to make strategic investments and let folks know that our city is open, our city is wonderful, and that we're willing to work with people to make their business and their neighborhoods better.
Mhm. So part of that also, I think, is an investment in education, but especially in just rethinking how education serves the city of Baltimore. Um, what are the big challenges in education in Baltimore, and how do we turn that around?
Well, one of the big challenges, and the biggest challenge, in my opinion, for as long as I can remember, has been the underfunding. And we know that now, thanks to the wonderful work of our Maryland State Senate and in the House of Delegates, General Assembly, Maryland is going to finally fully fund its public schools, including Baltimore City Public Schools, to the state's own admission had been underfunded by $300 million a year. We have to totally revamp our education to make sure that it's treating the whole child. That's why we, as Baltimore, as one of the leaders in community schools, are going to be working to expand that through the Built to Learn. We also know that when you think about CTE education, that has to be modernized. As a CTE graduate, college isn't for everyone. It was for me, it's for you, but not for everyone. We have to make sure that our young people and families are getting a quality education, so that when they graduate high school, they can go to work somewhere, partnering with the port, partnering with our industries in the city, partnering with our tourism industry and everyone else, to make sure that there's that pathway, including city government, to make sure that there's that pathway. Also, making sure that we are teaching in a 21st century way, that we're providing teachers with the tools that they need, the systems and support that they need, making sure that we have buildings that are built for young people to learn in through our 21st Century Schools program, which is now renovated 27, 28 new schools. And we have 3 more coming on board at the beginning of next school year, so that our young people are learning in school buildings that are not 60, 70 years old, that don't have air conditioning and heating, that actually are places that young people want to come to, their families want to come through. And we're going to make sure that we continue to partner to do that.
Mayor Scott, there's also the issue of making it possible for families and parents to be fully engaged in their children's education and in schools. And I think this is where we run into equity issues, where it is, and I think all parents would want to be engaged and involved, but it's harder for some than others because of economic issues. How do we tackle that challenge, which is not unique to Baltimore? I mean, it's around the country when we're dealing with lower income families that might not have the ability or the time to participate. And I ask this with the context that parental engagement and family involvement has a big impact on the educational quality of students and of the school itself.
Yeah, I think that when you think about that, and I'm glad you brought that up because if you're working two and three jobs, you don't have time to go to the PTA meeting because you're at work. And I think about that from a personal standpoint, knowing that, my parents were active and my mom and dad literally coached baseball at my brother's elementary school so that they would have a team, right? So, they had to have a conversation with me about how they would never see me run track. My mom saw me run one time. My dad never saw me run because they had to think about the greater good, that they had to be there for not just my brothers, but also for the other young people. And what we have to do, especially now that we have innovative ways of communicating like you and I are now, or that we have to build those things in. We have to make sure that we're setting up processes to meet the needs of every child in every family. That's how we do the whole child. You can't do the whole child in a cookie cutter model. It doesn't work. We have to figure out ways to connect those parents and families, connect those young people to services, be there for them in any way that we can, so that we're creating a sense of equity and stability in the lives of those young people.
As mayor, do you run into the issue of creating the ideal match in the labor market between capable, enabled employees and what's available in the workforce? Is that hard, and how do you deal with that in the city?
Yeah, it is an issue. And it's a big issue for us. And this is why I have told Jason Perkins Cohen, our leader of our employment development, that especially now coming out of the pandemic, that we have to be very intent about getting people who are employed trained so that they can stay employed and grow. Folks who are unemployed, folks who are coming out of high school, folks who are re-entering in society from prison, trained for the jobs that are available today. That's also going to be a partnership that we're making with the school system. I was just talking with some young people who are in the program where they're going to be doing just that, transitioning from high school into the workforce, but doing it in a way in partnership with OED to make sure that they're trained. We have to do that, especially coming out of the pandemic. So I'll leave it at that and say that you'll hear big things about workforce training coming from us in the near future.
Okay, I can't wait. That sounds good, and whatever we can do to contribute to that, please reach out. So I want to talk a little bit about your life story, and I'm sure at the age of 12, you imagined yourself becoming the mayor of Baltimore, right?
Yes.
So, what were the pivotal moments in your life that led you to where you are? You became an elected official, I think, at the age of 27. You're now mayor of the city of Baltimore. So, how did your life just take these twists and turns that got you to where you are?
Well, it's very simple. Growing up in Baltimore, when I grew up, where I grew up, and how I grew up is what pushed me to wanting to serve my city. Um, Last weekend was Preakness, right? So imagine being a young man or a young woman living in a neighborhood that literally the world descends on for one day of the year. And every other day of the year, you're not even really seen as human. We're a neighborhood where I saw my first shooting before I was 10 years old, where I lived next, to vacant houses, where I had to duck bullets, had to see people be shot, had to see folks and friends lose family members to overdose. I was talking about one Christmas where I had to give my coat to one of my friends. And me and my brothers, my cousin, gave video games to one of our friends because his mom was struggling with addiction to a point where she sold all this stuff on Christmas Eve. He went to sleep and it was there and woke up and it was gone. That's what, because as I asked my parents and was pestering my mom one day about why no one was trying to change that, She said, if you want to see a change, you got to do it yourself. So that's when I decided that this would be the way that I would go, because that was my purpose. Who better than someone who grew up through all of that to try to fix it than someone who grew up through all of that?
I teach our students two principles of how to design your next steps in the future. And one of them is to get inspired, and the other is to make audacious moves. I'd say I'd wrap all of that in the idea of getting some mentors around you, some people who can help you, with advice and open doors for you. I wonder what those audacious moves were for you. Maybe one of them is running for mayor, and maybe also the people who have had that level of impact on you, the mentors that have had an impact on you.
Yeah, I think I had a bunch of audacious moves. Really, when I graduated from St. Mary's College, I was working at Big Brothers Big Sisters, serving the city, running mentoring programs. That's what I did before I came to City Hall, and I decided at that time to go for a vacancy in the city council, and didn't get it, and then took a job first as a volunteer and then as a staffer for then City Council President Rollins Blake. If I didn't raise my hand and say that I wanted to fill that vacancy on the council, I wouldn't be here. You have to seize the moment and always know that sometimes when you shoot for the stars, you or you shoot for the moon, you might not make it, but you're going to land amongst the stars. And that was the first catapult for me. And that time as a staffer, both in the council presidents and the mayor's office and erecting parks, provided a deep understanding of city government from a lower level and then a mid level, and then deciding to run for office the first time at 27 was the next step at that. And then deciding to run for mayor and being very sometimes, especially in a role like mine, folks want to jump at things because they think they should or because other people think they should. And you have to be very cognizant of your moment and seizing your moment. Perfect example, in 2016, there were a bunch of folks who wanted me to run to mayor then, most notably Erica Bridgeford from Baltimore Ceasefire. And I remember having a conversation with her and saying, Erica, no, I'm not ready yet. The city's not ready for me yet. And I have things that I have to work on myself to prepare myself for that. And after I went, we had this conversation. She said, you were right. I didn't see it, but you saw it. You have to have that sense of self-awareness. And when I think about folks that inspire me over the years, from a political sense, thinking about Congressman Cummings, obviously someone that, I saw in schools when I was growing up, someone that even as my time as staff and elected official, I could always lean on for mentorship, and I miss him dearly. But also when I think about other folks that inspire me, I always talk about two, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. Malcolm X for his personal discipline in his personal life, someone who didn't eat bad things, didn't drink, didn't smoke. I've lived my life like that, basically as a following that example from him. I've never drank alcohol. I don't eat anything other than seafood. I am from Baltimore. I need obey and crabs. And then the other is Muhammad Ali, because his not only was he the best, but he worked the hardest to be the best. No one was going to outwork him. And that's the way that I love to be. I love to work hard. And he also wasn't afraid to tell everyone he's the best either. And you can do that when you work hard to be the best.
That's right. That's right. He was all of those things. He was also not afraid of speaking his mind and saying what's on his mind, even if it was unpopular or unconventional. Have you had already those moments as a mayor? I know you have prior to that, but as mayor, where you've had to make the statement that might not be the most popular at a time.
Oh yeah, all the time. And as I said, right after I got sworn in, I'm gonna make not the popular decision, but the right one. The right thing is what should be right in Baltimore, not the popular one. We've had for far too long people in my position who do the popular thing, not the right one. And we have to do the right thing over the popular one in order for me to be different, for me to be a mayor who's thinking about Baltimore beyond my time in office, because this isn't about me. This isn't about 4 years. This is about how I can set the city up to be a better place in. Whether that is what we had to do with COVID or anything else. Sometimes people were mad, but that's okay because we're working in the best interest of them.
How are we going to come out of this COVID crisis moving forward, and what will next year look like for Baltimore?
Yeah, I mean, next year will look a lot more normal. We'll be back to having festivals. We'll be back to having some of those other things that we like to see. We'll be making sure through ARP and other things that our community is recovering, that people are being empowered, that we're growing in equitable ways, and we're going to be working to make sure clearly that our city is a safer place.
So you've mentioned crab cakes in Old Bay, and I saw last year you got into a friendly feud with Washington D.C. about who's the better foodie place. So
This year, it was early this year. Yeah.
oh, was it this year? Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe everything seems like last year for me
Yeah.
during
COVID
COVID-19.
time, right? You're right.
That was just a couple of months ago. So what are some of your best foodie places? By the way, I happen to agree with you. I've lived in a lot of places in the United States. There's no better place for food than Baltimore. I truly believe that.
Yeah, and let me just state for the record again, DC's food does not compare to Baltimore's food. You go to DC for the atmosphere. You go to Baltimore to make your stomach feel good. That's all my colleagues from DC. But in Baltimore, I think for me, there's just so many options of things that you can have, right? So
Yeah.
if you want, for me, it's a nice day like today. If I wanted to go out and eat crabs, I would go do that at Captain James, right? If I want a crab cake, there's only one place I'm going, and that's Coco's. If I
Yeah.
want vegan food, right? If I want vegan food, think about the options for vegan food that we have here in Baltimore. If I want a fish sandwich, I'm going to Tater Cafe. There are so many places in Baltimore where you can get great food, and they're big and small. And that's what I think that what I think sets us apart. That the places that we love, that we know have great food, aren't always the places that can seat 200, 300, 400 people. No, it might be a carryout here in Baltimore that everyone's going to just to get that chicken box, or get the half and half, or get some fries, or get a slice of pizza. We have the best of all worlds when it comes to food.
I love Poppy's cuisine myself.
Oh yeah, Poppy's is good. Yeah,
That's one of my favorite, and I'm glad you mentioned Coco's. There's just so many options. You're right. You know, you as the mayor have the opportunity to define the future narrative of the city, and what people know it for. What do you want it to be known for? We'll make that our last question.
Yeah, I want Baltimore to be known as a city that dealt with its history of being the birthplace of inequity legislation. I
Mm.
want Baltimore to be a place that showed the world for the umpteenth time how wrong they were about Baltimore. Every time throughout the history of our city, when they thought we were down and out from the War of 1812, the Civil War, wherever, we came back, and we came back better. Our history in this city of civil rights. And I want us to be, excuse me, become a beacon of how a city that had deep challenges tackled those issues, didn't ignore them, but also uplifted all the great things that happened here, so that we can all truly work together to do more, so that we can own up to the moniker of being more.
I love it. I'm all in for that. By the way, what did you end up naming your new dog?
I did. The new puppy is Lord Grogu of Baltimore. There's actually a story in the Baltimore Sun that came out about him while we were on this call.
Oh, right now. Okay, that's good. Why everybody was banking on Shorty. I don't know why that is, but there's a story maybe behind that.
There is a story. It's about a viral video from me and a man named Shorty, and me telling him to pull his mask up that the whole world is seeing. But there was no way I was making my puppy Shorty.
I watched that, and I wonder if that was connected. Thanks for explaining. That sounds good. I know you're a busy man, and I really appreciate you just taking some time to speak with me and with us today. and to talk a little bit about the city that you love so much, and also on a day like today, and to share a little bit about Dante and his work. Thank you so much for all you do, and I'll keep following you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. And everyone, remember, the only vision that matters is the one that you create. Thank you.